DEI about to be out the door. There's a new hiring framework coming to town. This one is called MEI, Merit, Excellence, and Intelligence. That's what Alexandr Wang, CEO of artificial intelligence startup Scale AI, says that he is using to hire his staff.
Wang posted on X an email that was circulated within the company. In his lengthy explanation, he writes, quote, "Scale is a meritocracy, and we must always remain one. Hiring on merit will be a permanent policy at Scale. That means we hire only the best person for the job. We seek out and demand excellence, and we unapologetically prefer people who are very smart." The 6-year-old tech company is the latest example of businesses seeking to distance themselves from DEI. Wang's move drew praise from tech boss Elon Musk, who responded to the X posts with "great." Elsewhere in the X sphere, one user said, quote, "I hope this catches on in a huge way. It replaces DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, a parasite that started growing inside corporate America 3 decades ago." Others are skeptical of Wang's motives, as one user posted, quote, "Reading what Alexandr Wang wrote just to gain attention from people like Elon Musk is exactly why I have always been skeptical of DEI initiatives. Alex Wang has never been associated with DEI, so you have to wonder why he felt the need to write this article unless he wanted to be at the center of a cultural issue."
I think this is great news. This is how all hiring obviously should work. DEI is very bad and should be shown the door.
Why do you think DEI is bad, though?
I think hiring people for reasons other than you're the most qualified for the job is bad, and most employers know that. I also think the kind of efforts to foster a more, obviously the workplace should not be a hostile place, but specifically orienting it around the language of race-based grievances is totally ineffective. There's no evidence that any of these programs, or the implicit bias test, or having DEI seminars, or training, zero evidence any of it makes people less biased or less racist. The only time I've ever come anywhere close to working a real job was when I did sales for Comcast one summer, and we had to do these kinds of trainings, and everyone, including and especially the racial minorities, thought it was a total joke. I've never seen anyone get anything positive out of these things or think these are good ideas, except for the ludicrously well-paid seminar consultant type people.
So do you remember when Gap had a t-shirt that a black kid was wearing that had a monkey on it? And that was a big controversy, obviously, because of the racial implications of it. Things like that happen because you don't have African-American people in the room. The reason that companies end up having to hire crisis firms and crisis PR firms is because they don't have people in the room who understand the nuance in language. They don't understand the experience of the consumers. And so the reason that you have DEI isn't because the people who are being hired aren't qualified. They're certainly qualified. But during the hiring process, especially when you have a hegemonic group of people, so you have a bunch of white men in a room who are hiring, they're more likely to hire white men because it's a comfortable environment. I mean, we're all comfortable in communities that are our own viewpoint, that look like us. I mean, that's a human behavior. But we have to protect against that. When you have a company that doesn't have women, I mean, look at the 1970s, 1980s, before there were DEI initiatives. All those companies looked exactly the same. And you can't tell me that there weren't women or there weren't minorities that were just as qualified to be in the room.
Well, we should overturn policies, particularly legal policies, that deliberately discriminate or foster non-diverse workplaces, including all the ones that existed legally. I don't think, obviously discriminating in favor of just keeping it the same racial mix up as it was before is a good idea. But in the example you use, I would say that doesn't contradict MEI or just hiring the most qualified people. If you have a company trying to succeed in the business place, serve customers, not lose money because it does something embarrassing like what you just described, then you need to hire employees who understand those cultural sensibilities, and you're not doing it out of it's not like some good Samaritan impulse. It's because that's in the best interest of the company. So that's not I agree with you, but I don't think that makes it. And I don't know about. Certainly, is like lingering racism in the country. I don't deny that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there are some people more comfortable just being around
and I don't think
other
that's all
white
insidious,
people.
too.
But I don't. Yeah, but I don't think it's.
I don't think all
racism
is intentional racism, and it's all insidious racism.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of structural racism built in. For example, we have a broken school system in urban areas, and so a lot of those individuals aren't going to be able to go to Harvard and Yale just because of the schools that they start out in.
Right.
It's
more a class. It's more a class and wealth thing. Like if you have a white person who is more comfortable, to use your language, being around other white people, is it actually that they're more comfortable being around other white people, or they're just more, let's say this is a wealthy person, they're more comfortable being around wealthier, highly educated, progressive people, and those are disproportionately white people, but it's actually not a racial, race is a proxy for what the real thing is, which is like a class inequality or something like that.
I think that can be true, but as an African-American man who's done pretty well for myself, when people see me, they don't see me as a upper middle class person. They see a black person first, and I think
I see you as an upper middle class person. You're dressed better than I am.
But when I get pulled over, no cop knows whether or not I'm upper middle class. They see a black person first, and I think what DEI initiatives aim to do is at least try to level the playing field so that we can average out that experience is just as important a factor as whether you went to Harvard or Yale or institutions like that. And I think companies, they're not just better off, but I think they serve their consumers better when they have a vast amount of not just experience, but know-how, people who understand the demographics so that they can market. As Elon Musk talks about how great it is for merit, I'm often reminded, this is a guy who inherited his wealth. Yes, he's smart.
Well,
I don't think we could
some wealth. He didn't inherit being the wealthiest man on the planet wealth.
Yeah, but you can fail up when you have that kind of money. So when Elon Musk talks about merit, it really strikes me a little, it rubs me wrong, because when you're born with hundreds of millions of dollars, you by definition can sit on that money and live off the interest. You have the opportunity to take ventures.
But that's not what Elon did. He created Tesla. He created SpaceX. He's the person most likely on the planet to lead us to colonize Mars. I mean, that's not exactly resting on your laurels.
Yeah, but it's kind of like the Donald Trump analogy, though. Donald Trump was given hundreds of million dollars to start out. Elon Musk was given hundreds of million dollars to start out. And
I don't think I could launch a space colony no matter how many hundreds of millions of dollars.
I believe in you. I think you could do anything you set your mind to with an endless bank account.
Elon obviously irritates a lot of people for, he's an all-time he's a poster is I think the term, but he's also, you have to credit, and not every initiative he takes succeeds, but he's also a relentless and visionary businessman who has, created a tremendous amount of social value in the green energy space, in the space, which is where I think his main legacy will be.
I think Elon can be a smart person and a bad person at the same time.
Well, most of us are.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting because the more he attacks DEI, I think the more you're going to see not just Democrats, but people economically believe that DEI is something that's got to stick around. Because as we start to see these regressions, you start to see Clarence Thomas talk about rolling back the Civil Rights Act. You start to see Republicans talk about rolling back a lot of the protections that were put around in the 60s. Things are going to start looking a lot more normative, a lot less diverse. And I think you're going to see a lot more companies have issues.
Well, I don't think so, because I think you're broadly right that the corporate sector wants more. Again, I'm not against more diversity, but I would push back on the evidence that these specific, DEI means something specific. Mm-hmm. It means the kind of programs put on by the consultants on these issues. The scientific evidence that the kind of materials they present make some difference in attitudes or culture do not exist and are not and do not stand up to scrutiny. And that is the kind of industry that has arisen around this issue. I like diversity just fine. Yeah. I want diverse workplaces. I want actual diversity, whereas people who think differently, not just people who look differently. Often it's, this is most common at the the university admissions angle, where I think it is pernicious and in many cases explicitly illegal, and that's obviously being litigated before the court at various levels, but where it's like, oh, we need this many Latino people,
Yeah, I mean, I
this
think
many
quotas,
black people, this
quotas
many Native American people,
absolutely.
even though they all have identical, the kind of people being admitted to Harvard have identical thought processes. It's not actual diversity they want. It's they want just skin deep diversity.
You know, I think quotas are absolutely horrible. We don't want quotas. And I do think in some degrees we've seen some of the DEI initiatives go a little too far when you talk about, like, you know, I often talk with people who are Latino in the election process, and they talk about, Latinx.
Oh,
and they're always
oh,
like,
yeah.
Latinx isn't a thing. That's like not something that the community
The only
agrees with.
people who use that language are talking heads on MSNBC.
Yes, they're all from Chevy Chase, Maryland, and live in $5 million houses.
Indeed. All right, fun debate. We will have more Rising right after this.